Today we continue our NHL offseason plan series. We've now reached the number 15th team from the 21-22 NHL regular season, the Dallas Stars. What will we expect from them this offseason? What moves should they be looking at? We'll discuss the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we're continuing our NHL offseason plan series and exploring the Dallas Stars and what we should expect from them during the summer months, getting ready for the next year, the 22-23 NHL season. So if you're new to this series, we will have a video on each and every team. We're almost I'll get into the upper half of the league here now, obviously. We're going to recap the 21-22 season quickly, take a look at how things went, explore their salary cap situation. We're then going to look at expiring contracts, who are their expiring RFA and UFA deals that need to be re-signed or replaced, and what are the top burning questions or top priorities facing the franchise over the course of this offseason. So let's first get started with the 21-22 season recap. Now, of course, we know the Dallas Stars were a playoff team this year. They were the first wildcard team in the Western Conference, losing in 7 games, a close battle, hard-fought battle against the Calgary Flames. They went 46-30-6 in the regular season for 98 points. So overall, pretty solid campaign for the Stars. They scored 233 goals for 21st overall in the NHL. So certainly they had some, a few offensive players that really had great seasons. But for the most part, I think that's fair to say the biggest thing for this team is they need to improve secondary scoring. There's no doubt, which will help them get to the upper half of the league and have a chance to be just a little bit more successful here. Goals against were a little bit more respectable, 244 for 14th best. The power play was pretty solid, 22.4% for 11th best in the NHL. PK was certainly respectable, but just a little bit below league average here at 79%. For 19th best overall. Of course, at the end of the season, we learned that head coach Rick Bowness will not return. He's stepping away. His contract was expiring, and he's decided that he's not going to continue being the head coach in Dallas. And then, of course, Jim Nill and the Stars management decided that the rest of the coaching staff, or at least majority of them, would be let go as well. So certainly going to have a whole new set of coaches there behind the bench in Dallas. We also saw some great major improvements here from Jason Robertson, who continued to build off his solid rookie season, passing 40 goals. So he's certainly a young budding superstar in Dallas. It was nice to see him take off this year. And of course, we saw the performance of goaltender Jake Ottinger in the playoffs, an absolute coming out party for him. He's really been a pretty solid pro goalie now for a couple of years, but I think because of the location in Dallas and the fact they were in the playoffs, getting a little bit more national attention, certainly I think opened a lot of people's eyes just how good this young guy can be. Ottinger certainly not only looked upon now as the goalie of the future, but he's now the goalie of the present as well. We saw a lot of changes through the goaltending situation in Dallas this year. We learned early on, after a failed attempt at a return, that Ben Bishop was not going to be able to continue playing anymore, which was not good. Obviously, he had hoped to try to make a comeback, so that wasn't clear because they had him still under contract. They have Braden Holtby. Of course, there was Anton Hudobin. Hudobin, of course, ended up having surgery. He's got one more year on his deal, so that's certainly going to be an interesting scenario. Holtby's, we're going to talk about him too in the expiring contract. So the goaltending situation really evolved this year in Dallas, and it was certainly one of the major storylines. Now jumping over to take a look at their salary cap space, courtesy of CapFriendly.com. Their website has been fully adjusted now to reflect the 22-23 seasons being the current year. So we have 16 contracts on the books for next year, totaling just shy of $65 million. So that gives them salary cap space of $17.5 million to work with here. So that seems like a lot, but based on some of their expiring contracts, it's going to go quick, and it's not as flexible as it might seem here. They're going to probably be trying to find some creative ways to get some players re-signed while trying to find other ways to cut things so they can free up some additional space. At least that's what I think they're going to do. So now let's look at those contracts that are expiring. There are a lot, and there are some pretty important ones here. On the RFA side especially, we've got Jason Robertson. This is going to be a very interesting contract. I would think that the Stars should be comfortable going long-term with this guy. As we've learned with some of these young budding superstars, the price never gets cheaper as it goes. So teams are better off to try to lock him up long term. If he continues to put more, multiple back 40, 50 goal seasons here, if he does a bridge deal, it's just going to get more costly down the road. So you really need to lock him up. But obviously that's a big one that's going to be important. They also have Denis Gurianov, who's, he's definitely going to get a contract. I have no doubt about that. But I know he's one of the inconsistent players on this team. I think sometimes, as much as they like him, he also can be frustrating. You have Marian Studnik, and of course Jake Ottinger, who's going to be another unique contract here that's going to be very important for them. Like I said, Jake Ottinger went from like a year ago of, really the last couple of years kind of being viewed upon as the goalie of the future, to suddenly not only the goalie of the future, but the goalie of the present, the right now. Like, he was their MVP by far in the round one of the playoffs against the Calgary Flames. Some people were even asking the question, if the Dallas Stars happen to win this and move on, like, he's going to be a Conn Smythe candidate. It was that spectacular of a show that he was putting on against the Flames. Now on the UFA side, we've got John Klingberg, of course, the top long-time offensive defenseman there. Of course, Miro Heiskanen slowly taking over as being that top guy, which is obviously between his contract and Lindell. They signed Ryan Suter, is kind of boxing Klingberg out of re-signing in Dallas. So the odds of that happening are pretty slim, just based on pure logistics and money here, unless they find ways to cut salary, which is going to be challenging. You've got Vladislav Nemestikov, who was acquired along with Michael Raffle, both guys acquired as basically rental players. I don't expect them to be back. You get Alexander Radulov. I don't expect him to be back either. Obviously, he's been there for a number of years, had a couple of real solid seasons after signing as a free agent after leaving Montreal. But his play has certainly declined. He's battled a lot of injuries, and I'm not sure there's going to be interest to bring him back. Then, of course, you have defenseman Andrei Sekera. I don't think there's really room to bring him back. I don't know how they feel about him, but certainly looking at that blue line, when you have Klingberg, who you can't likely bring back, you've still got Heiskanen. Like I said, you've got Lindell, you've got Suter, you get Thomas Harley coming up. I don't know that it really, in the Hakanpää too, I don't think it makes sense to try to re-sign Sekera. And then a couple of goalies here in Scott Wedgwood and Braden Holtby. So that's certainly going to be interesting. I don't think Holtby will be back. You never know about Wedgwood, I guess, because that's one of the questions we're going to talk about in the next segment here, is goaltending and how do they move forward. So with all that said, what are the top burning questions facing the Dallas Stars, or the top priorities for this team this offseason? Well, first and foremost, they need a new head coach, and that head coach, to me, is important because that's going to determine likely the style of play that they decide to go with. Do they want somebody more defensive minded? Do they want to push the offense? How do they want to go about this? Because depending on the coach's preference and style and everything, they're going to probably want to, maybe at least tinker with the roster to kind of make sure they can fit players in that make sense to work well in a kind of area. So, obviously pretty much every team with a coaching vacancy is expected to try to speak to Barry Trotz. I don't know what the odds are of him landing in Dallas, but with other names we've heard include Rick Tocchet and even possibly longtime NHL player Mark Savard, who's now the head coach in the Ontario Hockey League for the Windsor Spitfires and doing a tremendous job over the past couple of years. So Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman have talked about this on their podcast and on the Jeff Merrick show, indicating that Merrick's heard that there is possibly some interest for Savard. Not to say 100%. If he doesn't get this job, I think it's not a big deal. Like, he will be a guy that's probably mentioned in NHL coaching vacancies over the next couple of years until something materializes for him. I'm not sure how long he's going to want to stay in junior, but obviously he'll want to have the right opportunity to make the jump. But certainly getting a new coach, big priority to me, because like I said, that impacts what kind of players you want to fit their system. Question number 2 is, will Klingberg be back? And if he's not, how do you replace him? Do you consider bringing in another right shot defenseman? I think the issue here is not just about money, it's about term and money both. I think based on what we've heard, Klingberg was looking to stay in Dallas, at least looking for an 8-year deal, probably around $8 to $8.5 million. Dallas didn't seem to have the appetite for that. I know, based on the fact that they have some other longer term contracts for some guys that are getting a little bit older too, primarily Ben and Sagan. I don't know that they want to go down an 8-year deal with a guy his age. I mean, he's not old, but he certainly would be, well into his 30s by the end of the deal. So there is some reluctance, I think, on that front. But there has been talk that if they lose Klingberg by free agency, maybe they would consider trading for a guy like Jeff Petrie in Montreal or a guy like Brent Burns in Dallas. I mean, both guys are veteran right shot defensemen who can drive play and be very offensive. Obviously, Burns is even older than Petrie. Both have a little bit of term in their contract, but nowhere near the 7 or 8 year deal you'd end up dishing out to Klingberg. If you're looking at adding a Petrie or a Burns for 2 or 3 years to have that right shot, defenseman who can be mobile and help with the offensive side of the game, for a couple more 2-3 years that, a little bit less money than what Klingberg's going to want might be something that they're open to. I don't think that either player would be a huge price tag. They're not going to be given away, that's for sure. But, each team, Montreal and San Jose, would be looking, primarily looking at the cap space gain back as a plus here. So I don't know exactly what it's going to take, but that is something that we could consider. I think when it comes to Klingberg, a number of teams that are out there, I know, look to Carolina. That's a possibility. Seattle's a possibility. There's a few other teams out there too that reportedly have been interested. I wouldn't completely rule out the LA Kings either. I think they will add another defenseman. I don't know they're going to want to go that rich though. That's probably a little bit more money than they're going to want to spend, but they're going to want to add a player similar style and capabilities if they can find it out there on the market for sure. But John Klingberg and his contract status is a big question mark for this team. Of course, another huge question, like I mentioned, is getting these RFA deals done for Robertson and Ottinger. It's not going to be cheap. It's going to be expensive. They have $17.5 million. You get a 40-goal scorer and now a number one goaltender. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take to lock both of these guys up. I mean, Ottinger, I don't think will get like a huge deal, but I can see him getting at least, I don't know, $4 to $5 million for sure. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they even crosses $5 million. But if you look at similar deals that we've seen for, look at what Jordan Binnington got after winning the Stanley Cup. Obviously, he was a couple years older than Ottinger, and he obviously, was a late bloomer compared to Ottinger at least, and obviously won a cup, so that's different. But we've seen other goalies get like $4 or $5 million on, 3, 4, 5 year deals. I think that he probably would be signed to the point that he would still be an RFA. So you're looking at a shorter term deal. I would think probably 2 to 3 years, somewhere in that range. So we'll see. He won't be as expensive as Robertson. I would think Robertson could get a 7-8 year deal. For a 40 goal scorer, you're looking at probably $8 million or more, right? I don't know exactly how high they're going to want to go with this kid. I mean, he's a 40 goal scorer, but it's one season. And if he was a 40 goal season for 2, 3, 4 years, well, obviously that price tag is just going to continue to rise. So I think they need to lock him up as long as they're able to. All that being said, if you look at $17.5 million in cap space available and they signed Robertson and Ottinger, I mean, that very well could end up taking, let's say that money takes $13-14 million maybe to sign those two players. That's quite possible. You're down to like $3 million, and we still talked about the fact that they have other guys like Gurionov that needs a deal. You've got these other UFAs that if you're not going to sign them, you got to replace them. That's not really a lot of money. That's difficult to say how that goes. Now, they do have Ben Bishop's contract, which I believe still has a year on it, so they can go into LTIR, but that's not really ideal. So it wouldn't be shocking to see this team try to find ways to save money elsewhere throughout their lineup as for cap space. I mean, really, what are they going to do, though? I mean, the guys making the most money, like Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn, those contracts are pretty much buyout proof, and they're probably not tradable given how much money they have and what kind of production these guys have been given. They both have a full no move clause too. You can't trade either one of them without their consent to any team. The way the signing bonuses are included, their last, I know in Ben's contract, I don't know Seguin's right off the top, but I was looking at Ben's on Cap Friendly just a short time ago, and he was making $1 million in salary for the last 3 years. The rest of it's all signing money, signing bonus. So the savings is non-existent, and they structured that way so they can't be bought out. So they will get paid in full. So getting rid of one of those big tickets, probably not going to stand any chance of happening unless you retain salary and you are able to convince them to accept a trade somewhere, which would be probably pretty challenging and difficult to do. So I don't see that happening. So I'm not really sure what else they can really do. There's not a ton of easy solutions or options there to really try to find some other available space by moving some things around. Obviously, getting Roope Hintz extended is a big deal too, even though he's not an RFA this year. He's entering the final year of his contract, put up 72 points, kind of solidified himself as the number one frontline player at center ice. So certainly getting Hintz extended is another big thing. It wouldn't kick in and affect the $17.5 million they have on the books this year, but it will kick in the year after where he's eligible in July for an extension, and that's not going to come cheap, and that's going to be another bigger ticket contract kicking in the year after. So they're going to have to do some juggling, and it's not going to be easy. Backup goaltending is another question. Jake Ottinger clearly could be the starter, there's no doubt. Can Anton Khudobin be the backup next year, or do they need to go sign somebody else? Because I don't think Holtby's returning. I guess that they could talk to Holtby, but maybe signing another short-term contract. I guess that is a remote possibility if they are interested. If not, they might have to dip into the market or trade market or the free agent market to find another goaltender if they don't believe Khudobin can go. Because, I mean, he did have a fairly significant surgery. I don't know if he's going to play next year or is he going to end up on long-term injury reserve as well. It's certainly debatable. So we'll have to see what the future holds between the pipes for the Dallas Stars. But there's lots of questions, way more questions than answers facing the Dallas Stars. They need secondary scoring. That was their big Achilles heel this year. Outside of your Jason Robertson, your Roope Hintz, your Joe Pavelski, a little bit out of Ben in second, but not enough. And the rest of the team is just not giving you anywhere near the offense. And of course, then on top of that, you're losing Klingberg, who's a big driver of offense from the back end. So, to me, that's why I think they do need to replace Klingberg if they can't get him signed. They need a defenseman who can play a similar role, but ideally have a shorter term on the contract and less money so they can work with that for the next 2 to 4 years. So I think they could be an active and interesting team to watch as we approach the offseason. So let me know your thoughts and expectations for the Stars this offseason down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.